Hello there, live from the attic. This is the Lloyd Evans channel and you are watching volume 2 of the Blood Tapes. So this is a series in which I review leaked footage from a contact within the Hospital Liaison Committee operation, I guess you could call it. So for those of you who don't know, a Hospital Liaison Committee is a group of elite elders who get handpicked to provide support to Jehovah's Witnesses when it comes to the stance on refusing blood transfusions, whereas it's supposed to be an optional arrangement. In many cases, these elders insert themselves with or without the request of the patient in medical decisions, and they basically manipulate the trust that hospitals have when it comes to allowing priests and faith leaders who might want to provide pastoral support. They abuse that trust to, again, insert themselves in medical decisions to the end of trying to make sure that the blood prohibition is upheld even if it results in the death of the patient. So that's what a HLC is, a Hospital Liaison Committee. And what we're going to watch are 2 talks from the 2022 HLC video conference. So in volume 1, we watched a series of dramatizations that were produced in 2019, and now we're watching an actual video conference in which these videos get shown. Now, in the 2 talks that we're going to be watching, the videos or the dramatizations aren't shown, but they will be shown later on in subsequent talks. Whereas in volume 1, I hadn't watched it in advance. I deliberately hadn't watched it because I wanted to react authentically and give you my honest reaction on first watching. This time I have watched both talks purely because I wanted to make sure that they were relevant to the viewers. I think it's very, very important that not just my viewership, but the world in general understands how hospital liaison committees operate and how Jehovah's Witnesses are coerced into having life-saving medicine declined or refused, or being bullied into refusing life-saving medicine. So I guess that's my preamble pretty much done. Let's get into the talks. I will keep an eye on the comments and show some of them later, although it's a little bit difficult. Many thanks to Sharon Idle for your super chats. That's very kind, Sharon. I'll try and keep on top of the comments and get your reaction as much as possible while trying to make some headway through a 23-minute clip. And obviously volume 3 will take us deeper into the video conference for the HLC. So that's it. Let's get stuck in. Let's roll the first clip.
Privileged to extend a very warm welcome to the annual HLC video conference. To begin with, let's open our meeting in prayer.
That was where the prayer was.
So I'd now like to invite Brother Paul Norton, a member of the Britain Branch Committee, with our opening item, Find Joy in Assisting Others During Turbulent Times.
So this is obviously the guy whose job it is to be the chairman for the video conference, and he's just introduced Paul Norton, who we've heard there is a branch committee member. So, I don't want to kind of lose myself in explaining things too much, but for those of you who don't know, a branch committee, think of it as like a local governing body. So he is a branch committee member for Britain. So the Britain branch, which covers Ireland and I think Malta, if I'm not mistaken, and a number of other parts. The Britain branch has its own group of elite elders who form the branch committee, and underneath the branch committee you have the Hospital Information Services Department, and or HID, I think it's referred to. And so Paul Norton, as a branch committee member, is now going to address the HLCs at this video conference as a branch committee member, so as basically a superior in the hierarchy.
Brother Norton.
Yes, welcome everyone to our annual video conference for HLCs. At the outset, we want to convey the heartfelt appreciation of the governing body and the branch committee for everything that you do, brothers. Thank you. And also, if you're married, please convey our appreciation to your wives for their support. And we also want you to know that a recording of this program will be made today and made available to you in about a week's time, so you can review the contents. Well, the opening talk here has this theme, finding joy in assisting others during turbulent times. And you'll see there are three main components to that theme: assisting or training others, finding joy in doing so, and doing it in turbulent times.
I find it, just to cut in there, I find it quite interesting that Paul Norton, who again is a branch committee member, and he's addressing not just the ordinary rank and file, as you would expect in a convention program or an assembly program or in a JW broadcasting episode. He is addressing kind of elite hand-picked elders who've been chosen as HLC members. So he's addressing people who, how can I put it? He should be able to bank on them having a certain level intellectually where he doesn't need to speak down to them, and he doesn't need to break apart the theme in the way he did, and he doesn't need to infantilize. It's just fascinating for me that this Paul Norton, and I'll be honest, this is the first time I've seen him. I think it's actually quite interesting from the point of view of piecing together the way the Britain branch functions. It's interesting that we're being introduced here to Paul Norton by way of this leaked footage. It's just fascinating for me that even at HLC level, there's infantilization going on. There's the audience being spoken down to as though they're primary school children. So I just wanted to make that observation.
Well, I think we're all aware of the turbulence, aren't we? We feel it. Why is it happening? Why is life challenging? Well, if we turn to Revelation chapter 12, we'll see the reason in verse 17. We are involved in a spiritual warfare. Sometimes that involves persecution. Let's read it together. It's Revelation 12 and verse 17. It says, "So the dragon became enraged at the woman and went off to wage war with the remaining ones of her offspring, who observe the commandments of God and have the work of bearing witness concerning Jesus." So since the time he was cast down to the earth, Satan has been enraged against Jehovah's heavenly, wife-like organization.
That's a wife-like organization, yes. Jehovah is married to the organization, as we all know. Make of that what you will.
But since he no longer has access to heaven, he wages war against the part of Jehovah's organization that he can access. And these are the remaining ones of the woman's seed, or the anointed remnant.
Now, this again is fascinating, just kind of tagging on to the point I made about infantilizing rhetoric. Paul Norton is here basically going through a Jehovah's Witness Theology 101 with an elite group of elders who understand the theology backwards and forwards and sideways. They really don't need this explaining, you know? So I have to wonder to what extent Paul Norton, or indeed the Britain branch, have confidence in, how can I put it, the knowledge of the theology of even their own elders, if they're having to explain 1914, the 1914 teaching, or go through it in this amount of detail. Now, the reason why he's doing it in this case is to press home this "we're at war" rhetoric, this war cry of the kind we've heard David Splain issue. Jehovah's Witnesses in general are to feel as though they're kind of soldiers in this weird soldier situation, you know, that they are at war, basically. And so Paul Norton is repeating the war cry of his governing body overlords, and he's repeating this doomsday kind of under siege rhetoric that the entire world is obsessed with crushing Jehovah's Witnesses and persecuting them. So he's essentially explaining the turbulent times element of his theme. You know, Jehovah's Witnesses in general believe that we're living in turbulent times, but Paul Norton is going through, again, this JW Theology 101 to drive home this idea that Jehovah's Witnesses are under siege and HLC elders are effectively kind of on the front line.
And we know, because of our close association with them, we too are targets. But now, did you notice the reason why he is so angry here in verse 17? It's because the anointed and those that associate with them are so zealous in bearing witness about Jesus, the person who cast him out of heaven. And, notice, because they observe the commandments of God. Now, what is one of those commandments? It is to keep abstaining from blood.
It's to keep abstaining from eating blood, Paul. It's not to keep abstaining from white blood cells as opposed to hemoglobin. You know, this he's making it such a black and white thing when, as I've explained in various videos, the blood teaching is so twisted and so convoluted. We all partake of white blood cells when we have milk on our cornflakes in the morning, which I can assure you Jehovah's Witnesses do. And all Jehovah's Witnesses, apart from drinking the white blood cells of cows in cow's milk, they also partake of white blood cells when they are babies in the mother's breast milk, certainly in the first week. So we are awash with other people's blood in terms of white blood cells, and yet white blood cells aren't to be used medically because they're considered one of the four main components of blood, because that happens to be the way blood responds to centrifugal forces. It separates into four components, as though the Bible writers, number one, were remotely interested or knowledgeable about the use of blood medically, and number two, if they were interested in how blood might be used medically, were thinking about how blood reacts when it's being spun in a machine. So, no, I reject the entire premise there, Paul Norton.
Acts 15:29. So note this point. Satan and his visible agents use our refusal of blood transfusions as one of their principal tools in opposing God's people.
Now that was interesting. Satan and his visible agents. Satan has agents everywhere. Probably I'm one of them. Use the refusal of blood transfusions as a tool. It's not that Jehovah's Witnesses are being abusive by pressuring people and persuading people to die over this ridiculous and convoluted teaching. It's that Satan and his agents are being unfair by calling this to people's attention. They've put it completely back to front. So we're only a few seconds in to Paul Norton's talk, and already I'm starting to very much dislike him. And I'm one of these people who very much tries to shy away from forming impressions based on, you know, the way people look or the way people sound. But I have to say early on, I don't like the way he looks, and I don't like the way he sounds. He looks, or he certainly sounds like a Rottweiler. Like he sounds like one of the organization's pit bulls, quite frankly. And even his body language, which maybe he can't help, but his body language is, I would suggest, even quite condescending and aloof and self-important. So, yeah, Satan's agents. Welcome to all who are watching who are agents of Satan.
Satan targets sacred things, including our view of the sacredness of life and blood. So he creates
He's targeted a view.
the turbulence, but we still need to fly. And that's why we need brothers like you.
He's created the turbulence, but we still need to fly. He probably penned that, and like when he penned it, he was like, "Yeah, that's going to go down really, really well." For me, it didn't quite have the power. Need to give it a bit more punch there, Paul. But anyway, continue.
To be trained to skillfully assist our brothers and sisters when they face faith-challenging medical situations.
Skillfully assist. So this is the language that we're getting now. We need to be prepared and trained to skillfully assist our brothers and sisters. It's not about inserting yourself in their medical treatment. It's not about being invasive regarding the details of them as people and as patients, as we're going to hear more about later. It's not about violating all sorts of boundaries and pretending to know more than doctors in life-saving, in life or death matters. It's all about assisting. And when I was watching this, I couldn't help throughout these talks shuddering at the thought that there's a room full of people. I say room full, it's a video conference, so lots of people connected over Zoom and what have you. But he's talking to real HLC members who insert themselves in real medical emergencies. And even in the two talks that we're watching now, at the start of this video conference, they admit that sometimes the outcome is negative. In other words, sometimes their intervention results in someone dying. I think we probably should at this point just pause and take in some of the comments. So Ali Dowd says the writers of the Bible could not have been writing about blood transfusions, given that blood transfusions didn't come to be until hundreds of years later, the 19th century. That's when people started to use blood in that way. So yes, the writers of the Bible definitely could not have had the medical use of blood in mind. And, as I've argued before, if anything, the Jewish tradition of Pikuach Nefesh. I've probably butchered the pronunciation, but it's, well documented. Completely negated the concept of allowing people to die over any such prohibition. So, in other words, according to the Pikuach Nefesh, and again, I've mispronounced it probably, according to that tradition, which Jesus himself appealed to when he, for example, said, "Who of you is going to leave your bull in a pit to die on the Sabbath?" There was no way that the ancient Jews would have tolerated a system whereby people were allowed to die due to this obsession over the, every detail of observing the law. In other words, the preservation of life came first, which is why, if you think about it, despite, Orthodox Jews taking their beliefs extremely seriously to the point where they'll maybe cause a ruckus on a plane if they get seated next to a woman and that kind of thing, despite them having some very, very black and white interpretations of the Torah and of the Bible commands in the Old Testament, they don't refuse blood. They don't, and that they know the Hebrew scriptures inside out. So Jehovah's Witnesses are really the only widely known religion that does this, and their theological basis for it is it's not there. They don't have a solid theological basis. You can call that satanic persecution or turbulence if you want, Paul Norton. Amas of Potage, thank you very much indeed for your very generous super chat. That's very kind. Or is it Ames of Potage? Thank you for actually finding joy in assisting others during turbulent times. That's very sweet of you. Thank you very much indeed. Crossroads Circle, a regular in the live chat, says the repetitive speech and infantilization is a necessary part of keeping them indoctrinated. He has to keep them submissive at all times, no matter the status. Very true. Abigail Parker says, it never made any sense to me, but as a faithful Jehovah's Witness, I blindly obeyed and would have laying down my life for this cult built on a publishing company. That's, again, one of the most chilling things is that this stuff kills people. We are getting a grandstand view of the machinery at the heart of the Jehovah's Witness organization that is taking lives on a week-to-week, if not day-by-day basis. Because when I interviewed Daniel Graves on the channel, who works on the Hospital Information Services Department for 3.5 years, the interview is on my channel. He said that it was, when I pushed him on how many it was over the 3.5 years that will have died, that he was able to see because he was seeing the emails coming through and what have you. He admitted that it was in the thousands. Or he said it was in the thousands. So it's carnage. It's carnage. The Unanointed, thank you very much indeed for your super chat. It's something you've already highlighted, Lloyd, but my biggest problem is, where do this accepting fractions believe those fractions came from? #worldly sources. Indeed, if you're going to say a red blood cell can't be accepted, but it can be accepted if you can somehow get the hemoglobin out of its wrapper and use the hemoglobin without its wrapper, because that's all a red blood cell really is. How does that make any sense? It's the hemoglobin that makes blood red. It's the hemoglobin that's responsible really for oxygenating the body, and yet somehow you can have it. You're allowed to have it if you can get it out of its wrapper, and it doesn't do anything if you just inject it without the wrapper. The cell, which has actually shed its nucleus in the evolutionary process so that it can more efficiently deliver oxygen to the body. So it's a hot mess from every angle, the blood teaching, and yet here we have a video conference where elders are being schooled on how to enforce it by, again, this organizational Rottweiler in the form of Paul Norton.
Now, the other two components to our theme were training others and finding joy in doing so. Why do we find joy in training others? It's really because we have Jehovah's view of training, which Jesus Christ himself had as well. What view was that? Let's read the Apostle Paul's words in Acts chapter 20. This was that elders' meeting in Miletus. And in Acts 20, let's read what he said to those elders in verse 35. He said, I have shown you in all things that by working hard in this way, you must assist those who are weak, and must keep in mind the words of the Lord Jesus when he himself said, there is more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. That's what Jesus said, and that's what Jesus did. He was generous with his knowledge. And many experienced HLC members have felt the same joy by training others. It's a joy to copy the Christ. It's a joy to train others.
Train others to assist in arranging for people's martyrdom. That's what we're talking about. It's nothing elevated. He's not talking about shepherding in general or assisting people in a pastoral way in general. He's talking about, again, a mechanism that's responsible for hurrying people towards the doors of death. As I've referred to them before, or as others have referred to them, these are angels of death. They are grim reapers in suits and ties who turn up at the hospital and whose mission is to make sure that no blood gets transfused. And as I've repeatedly argued, if it's purely the patient's choice, why are they needed in the first place? If it's the personal decision of each and every Jehovah's Witness, why do they need to be there? Because it's the doctor's job to respect the rights of the patient. You don't need men in suits, these grim goons, to turn up in order for doctors to understand that patients have the right to accept or refuse medical treatment. You know, the awful blood cards are all that you need in order for doctors to understand that blood has been refused in advance. And if a patient wants to change their minds because death is at the gates, that's their decision too. But how are they going to make that call? How can they be allowed to change their minds if they have elders stood by their bedside, literally watching as they die? Where's the room for them to change their minds if they want? The HLC arrangement completely steamrollers over patient choice, and it should be ended. You know, governments should be clamping down on this, but unfortunately, not enough people know about the HLCs and how they operate. And so one of the reasons why I'm doing this Blood Tapes series and sharing this leaked footage, which has been very bravely leaked by a HLC insider, you know, one of the reasons is so that we can hopefully educate doctors and people who are involved in legislating so that these goons aren't allowed into hospital wards, let alone having the red carpet rolled out for them, as is the case in many NHS trusts.
Some of whom, we know, will become very skillful themselves. Now, when that happens, it benefits the entire committee. Well-trained members, they help to share the workload. Also, a consistent training program will ensure that skilled brothers are on hand even though others are away, so the committee functions properly. Also, training a new member, it's like a mini refresher course for the trainer. He might become aware of guidelines or direction that perhaps were not being implemented. And then we know new members.
He may see areas of the guidelines. Actually, let's go back because I want to get this perfectly right.
It's like a mini refresher course for the trainer. He might become aware of guidelines or direction that perhaps were not being implemented.
Paul Norton. Paul Norton has just said that there might be guidelines that are not being implemented. Again, this is a life or death situation. No one's demanding that HLC elders be a thing. No one's demanding that there has to be intervention. But if you are going to insert yourself by making this arrangement, if you are going to insert yourself in patient care, in life or death decisions, and you're going to have a bunch of guidelines, you damn well sure need to make sure they get followed. And here it's like, oh, maybe in some cases our guidelines won't get followed. But we'll find out about it because someone might join who's a bit more switched on, and he'll bring it to the attention of others on the committee. Have I mischaracterized what's just been said? That seems to me to be what he's just said. So, HLCs should not be a thing to begin with, for the reasons I've already explained. That they are not, but it's not just that they shouldn't exist, it's that they're not fit for purpose, because in just his opening minutes, he's acknowledging that in some cases the guidelines might not get followed. And again, we're talking life or death matters. Life or death matters. People die because of this stuff. So what about those situations if guidelines aren't followed and someone dies because of it? Albeit probably more people would survive if they completely ignored all of the guidelines, to be fair. But that's apparently how man-made and clumsy all of this is. That Paul Norton needs to make that point.
And then we know new members, they also have qualities and skills that even experienced HLC members can learn from. And that, of course, benefits the entire committee. Now, this video conference today will address this vital matter of training and how experienced HLC members can find joy in doing it. During the course of our program, please try to find the answers to the following 3 questions. The first is, what guiding principles help HLC members when handling medical cases? The second question, how can a step-by-step approach help newer HLC members to handle medical cases effectively? And the third, what lessons can be learned from how experienced HLC members handle medical cases? It is our prayer that this program will motivate you and equip you to find joy in training others.
So, again, this is a motivational talk. Paul Norton's job here, as, again, a branch committee member, is to motivate HLC elders to assist Jehovah's Witnesses towards martyrdom in medical emergencies involving blood transfusions. And again, I mean, look at his body language. I can't help but notice how searing his kind of resting face is. If you compare his body language with that of, say, Mark Sanderson, you know, Mark Sanderson at least tries to look jovial when he's being culty and manipulative. And, you know, he's even given a HLC talk. Well, I'm sure he's given many HLC talks, but, you know, I've had his a leaked talk he gave to HLCs on the channel, thanks to a HLC insider. Mark Sanderson's kind of resting face is quite jolly, you know, to the point where you think, oh, he seems like a normal chap. But this guy scowls. I think he's just a bad un, as we'd say up north. And I've noticed one or two in the live chat trying to nail down his accent. I think I agree with whoever said that it's actually probably a Lancashire accent. He's from up north, and up north where I come from in the UK, we say that one's a bad un. He just has that look about him, and I think that's what's required, to be honest, to get to positions like the one he's in, of branch committee member. I think there needs to be something a little bit. Well, you need to be able to see the evil and be okay with it. And this individual, this specimen, is very clearly waist deep in evil on a day-to-day basis, and happy to export more of it.
Now, let's give our attention to Brother Tom Gregory from the Liverpool HLC. He's going to present this part, Handling Medical Cases, Guiding Principles. Brother Gregory.
So Paul Norton's words or opening words at least, are now over. And we now switch to Brother Gregory, who is actually joining the video conference via Zoom. So we're now going to get a Scouse elder from Liverpool way, and he's going to continue the conference with his talk.
Why does being a HLC member bring you such personal satisfaction? Yes, it is a way of showing that we love Jehovah with everything that we've got, but it also means that we really love our brothers and sisters.
Can I just say, by the way, I don't know what happened at the beginning there. So the file as it was shared with me sort of joins Brother Gregory. There isn't like a clean intro in the file I received, so it's not like I've edited out his intro. This is what was passed to me. So this is, as far as I'm aware, this is what HLC members were shown as well. It's just, to be completely honest with you, if I'm scrutinizing this from a kind of video making, kind of filmmaking perspective, there are quite a few issues. You can tell that this material hasn't been through perhaps the normal channels of production and QC that maybe a JW Broadcasting episode might go through. It's a little bit kind of cobbled together for reasons. I mean, presumably they don't want just about anyone or just about any Bethelites seeing this stuff for understandable reasons.
And their children. For them, we truly are brother born for times of distress.
Sorry, did he?
But it also means that we really love our brothers and sisters and their children.
We really love our brothers and sisters and their children. Yeah. If this is what love for the brothers and sisters and their children looks like, I'd hate to see what hatred looks like.
For them, we truly are brother born for times of distress. It's important that we recognise that love has to be the motivating factor for all that we do. In fact, it is the first of 5 guiding principles that will help us as we care for our brothers as effectively as we can. The other four principles that we're going to consider in this item are gather accurate information, analyse the case, make wise use of available resources, and collaborate with others. Now, as loving shepherds, you know we often respond to urgent telephone calls about brothers who need our assistance, and we're willing to go to the hospital even late at night to support our brothers when they're at their most vulnerable. Now, we can be assured that Jehovah and Jesus always take notice of our efforts, whether seen by others or not.
Yeah, this is going to be a key point that Brother Gregory is keen on making. He's really, in his opening words, trying to reassure HLC elders that their work is valued, even though they're not getting praised for it by the rank and file, who largely won't have a clue what's going on. I mean, unless you are an expectant mother, or you go through a medical emergency, or someone you care about or you're close to goes through a medical emergency, you're really, or maybe you're an elder, you're not really going to run into the HLC at all. You know, they operate in the shadows, and as a result, they don't get their egos massaged by the rank and file, at least not regularly. And so Brother Gregory is here reminding them that, well, at least Jehovah's seeing what you're doing, and Jehovah really, really appreciates you, again, ushering your brothers and sisters towards martyrdom.
And I'm sure you'd agree that the average brother, or maybe even elder, doesn't really grasp the extent of what you do as a HLC member. But we have this reassurance from Jesus himself that he and his Father are fully aware of the love that you show to your brothers. And Matthew chapter 25, verses 39 and 40, note what Jesus said some will be prepared to do. It's at Matthew 25, 39 and 40, and it says this: "When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" In reply, the king will say to them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." Yes, Jesus takes it personally. He notes all of what you do to support your sick brothers and sisters.
Jesus knows, Jesus cares, Jesus thinks you're all fantastic, is essentially the point he's making there.
And we know that this special assignment comes at a cost, especially emotionally. But we also know that we're not doing this work in our own strength. It is Jehovah who sustains us as HLC members. It is, as it says in Philippians 2:13, God is the one who energizes you, giving you the power to act. No, we're not on our own. And in the particularly challenging situations that you've already faced and handled, you prayerfully relied on Jehovah to be the source of wisdom on how you should act. So how important it is to pray with sick ones and their families.
It's not just about praying with sick ones and their families. Again, this is the illusion that HLCs exploit in order to get their foot in the door. Oh, you know, we're just ministers of religion. We're like the Catholic priest on the next bed along. We're just here to say comforting things and pray with people. No. Check out what's in their bags. Ask to see, please, if you're a doctor watching this, next time you come across a HLC member carrying a briefcase, just say, do you mind if I have a look what's in your bag? Oh, I'd rather not show you. In my hospital ward, you're damn well going to show me what's in your bag. Check out the folder. Check out all the worksheets about how to coerce medical professionals and how to give these cookie cutter responses to people who've dedicated years of their lives to understanding human anatomy and how the human body works. And these goons have got these pre-prepared cookie cutter worksheets so they think they know better. My blood pressure's starting to rise. I should really control it.
To encourage them to pray for patience, endurance and strength, for them to remain faithful. And the peace of God, as it says in Philippians 4, 6 and 7, will guard their hearts and their mental powers by means of Christ Jesus. Now let's consider what happens after we've received a request for urgent assistance. Okay, what's the first thing that we do? Take a breath. Hospital Liaison Committee Guidelines, Chapter 7, Paragraph 7 says this: even in emergency situations, it is appropriate to take the time to look into the matter, making a thorough investigation and inquiry. Do not let the apparent urgency of a matter prevent you from properly assessing it. It goes on to say, of course, good judgment is needed and you may be able to provide some assistance right away while continuing to gather more complete patient information. So do you see there, the second guiding principle to help us effectively handle a medical case is to gather accurate patient information.
Sorry, Alan.
The medical emergency worksheet, which we refer to henceforth as the HLC 7, helps us to capture all this vital information about the patient.
The worksheet that we're all familiar with helps us to capture this medical information about the patient. So data gathering, data harvesting is what we're talking about here. And I do just want to pick up on what he said a moment ago about being patient, or when there is a medical emergency, not kind of being hasty and just relaxing and taking a breath. So in the Blood Tapes Volume 1, we saw this in reality. You know, we had this dude at like 2:30 a.m. in his pajamas, in this very relaxed vibe, interrogating or asking questions of this lady whose husband was in a life or death situation. And he's asking her to gather all sorts of medical information so that he can be informed. And he's completely relaxed. You know, it's seconds are ticking by and a man is dying. And this guy's in his pajamas, coming up with all sorts of questions to ask. And to the point where he's just completely relaxed. And these are not, it's worth just reiterating, these are not medically trained people. They've not received medical training. They don't have any medical credentials. And here the advice is, well, be relaxed. You know, when the call comes in, just take a breath, just chill a little bit. Everything's going to work out. Just calm down and focus on obtaining data, medical data about an individual with or without their consent. And that's going to be made very clear, by the way, about consent, as we're going to see.
Things such as, well, has the patient actually requested HLC assistance?
There you go. Has the patient even requested our involvement? Yes or no? Spoiler alert, if it's a no, the form still gets filled in. So it's almost like an afterthought, you know? Do they want us to be involved? No. Okay, well, let's fill the form in anyway, just for the hell of it, just in case. I mean, maybe they'll change their minds in the next, few minutes of their death, and they'll decide that they do want our help. How is this not a violation of people's privacy? How is this not a monumental invasion of privacy? If their first consideration, apart from taking a breath, they get the luxury, by the way, of taking a breath, unlike all the people they've killed. Their first consideration, apart from taking a breath, is harvest data, harvest medical data. And, oh, while we're doing that, let's find out whether they even want our help.
A pertinent medical history, as the patient got any other diseases, or are they on any other medications?
What medication are
they
they on?
Impact on treatment. The details about the medical issue at hand include lab values, the specific diagnosis, and why is the treating doctor actually suggesting a blood transfusion?
Private data.
What about his age? Is he actively bleeding?
Let's get the
What
date
is
of
the degree
birth.
of anemia? Are there any clotting issues? Is he on any anticoagulants? These are all things which will impact on how you're going to respond to this particular challenge, this particular case. How about his spiritual status? You know, this is actually included on the HLC 7, and the HLC guidelines, chapter 7, paragraph 7 says this: it is appropriate to determine the spiritual standing of a patient, particularly his level of conviction.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Let's find out how devout he is, or she. Let's find out about their spiritual status, their spiritual standing, and whether they actually believe this shit to begin with. Are they even fussed? You know, they may have been baptized, which is why we're doing this to begin with. They're on our records, they're on our books, but you know, what's their spiritual status? To what extent do they even believe this? What's their level of conviction? And spoiler alert, the way you find this out, apparently, is by contacting the local elders, because a HLC member may not necessarily have anything to do with your local congregation. A HLC is kind of operating on a higher level than just a congregation. So when a HLC member is filling out this form, with or without your consent or knowledge, you know, you could be dying on a hospital bed, and this data is being gathered about you and your spiritual condition. So when this data is being gathered, what he's going to say now is, oh, you call the local elders and you find out from the local elders whether the patient has been a naughty boy or not. You find out his spiritual status and the level of conviction from the elders. So straight away we're learning that it's not quite as cut and dried as saying the elders are shepherds, the elders are there to assist the sheep, the elders are there to provide comfort and support. They're also, if we take this at face value, which we should, they're also effectively spying on people. They're also evaluating people's spiritual condition, so that when forms get filled out without the Jehovah's Witnesses' knowledge, they can say, oh, actually, he's been a naughty boy recently. We caught him going to the cinema and watching an R-rated film. Or, you know, he recently wore some tight pants. So make of that what you will. It's very, very telling in this video, not just the way HLCs operate and how invasive they are, but how invasive the entire elder arrangement is, because part of the process involves inquiring of elders the spiritual condition, the spiritual standing and level of conviction of the individual. How should that be relevant if they've already consented to this? How should that be relevant, what their spiritual condition or level of conviction is? It's only a relevant question if you take consent out of it completely. If you assume that perhaps the person hasn't consented, that this is all being done without their knowledge.
So, you may say, that's all well and good, but I don't particularly know this person very well. The thing is, the local elders do, and they're in the best position to give you an honest evaluation.
The elders will tell you.
To that question that's being raised. Okay, so that's the second point. Now, the third guiding principle is to analyse the case. We're not doctors. So we need to research the medical condition.
We're not doctors, so we need to research the medical condition. If you're not doctors, Brother Gregory, you should be getting lost, is how I would put it. Diplomatically, you should be nowhere near this if you're not doctors. It's not as simple, obviously, as just doing research on a medical condition that someone is in the process of dying from. No, well, I'm not a doctor, but hey, I have Google. So maybe I can just jump on Google and I'll skip the need to go to medical training and through years of medical higher learning in college. I'll skip through all. I can bypass, jump, woo! I can just jump to the point of being an expert on this particular condition if I just do a few seconds of research. What arrogance! This is pure arrogance. How dare they think they know better than doctors when they're confessing freely that they have no medical training? How dare they think that a bit of Googling or reading whatever crap worksheets they've been told to hold on to, how dare they think that that puts them in a position where they can in any way insert themselves in life or death matters? I need to calm down or I'm going to swear.
And where do we go? We use reputable reference websites and apps, such as the Merck Manual. HLC Guidelines, Chapter 10, Paragraph 13 will give you some other alternatives. And Paragraph 14 will give you some caution on the judicious use of websites and why we might not want to forward links indiscriminately.
We don't want to forward links indiscriminately, so even when it comes to their kind of hasty, last-minute, what's the word? What's the word when you've... my mind's going blank because I'm so enraged. The hasty, last-minute swatting up on medical knowledge, they have to bear in mind that some websites or resources are off limits, are taboo, and they can't forward links to their colleagues if it's from an unreputable source.
Of course, the key factor which we really want to answer is why blood transfusion is an issue.
None of your business.
Now, as in the ministry, we can only use the toolbox effectively if we know what's in it. Similarly, in HLC work, we make good use of the HLC toolbox by learning how to use specific tools in it, such as clinical strategies documents, the medical information for clinicians section on jw.org, hospital liaison committee guidelines, supplementary medical information for HLCs or the HLC 25. This contains some really useful help when it comes to oral anticoagulants, especially the NOACs or DOACs, and the reversal issues that are associated with these.
He really knows his stuff. Oh, God, you have to laugh or you'll cry. That's him flashing his medical knowledge. Especially the anticoagulants. Hey, I just used a medical word. Now I sound like I know what I'm talking about. It's like a would-be Mark Sanderson. This is kind of what Mark Sanderson was doing in his talk. Mark Sanderson had found out a little bit about treating infants, and based on what little he knew from his drive-by research, he felt he knew better than doctors. And that's the same arrogance that we're seeing here. Actually, what we'll do, just so I can calm down a little bit as well, because we've been running for an hour now, we will just take a look at some of the comments. I'm just trying to think whether I need to find where I'm up to with the comments. Just bear with me one moment. The unanointed, sorry, I think I might have shown that one already. It was this one, sorry, that I wanted to show. I remember speaking to my aunt who brought me into the organisation that I prayed for an opportunity to prove myself to Jehovah, even if it meant refusing blood. I think I might have I shown that one? Sorry, my brain's mushy peas. The YouTube user says, my 87-year-old Jehovah's Witness Nana died because she refused blood. Both her parents lived to 99, possible 13 years lost. Hurts. I too have a family member who died refusing blood. So goodness knows how many martyrs there are. Ellie says, Abigail, I never even thought about it until I was already out. As a child, I remember hearing about kids who died and hoping that I'd be strong and faithful enough to die for it too. Yeah, you prayed to have the faith to die for this, you know, if push came to shove. Sabrina V. Craft says, I have been threatened since I was 5, about 60 years ago, getting life-saving gamma globulin shots. I was in a life-threatening situation with extreme anemia, still have that problem, finally out, no fear. I'm very sorry to hear that you were in that situation, Sabrina. Gamma globulin is another issue where the theology just completely unravels, because you need to harvest blood from multiple sources in order to isolate the gamma globulin. So when we're talking, it's not just like in a normal transfusion where person A gives blood to person B. When it comes to the production of gamma globulin, they need to harvest like many liters. I forget what the figure is. So yeah, the theology is just mad. Andrea Van Hoof says, hi from Belgium. Thanks for all your efforts to make such eye-opening videos. Can't believe the JW speaker is able to spread this nonsense. I share your disbelief. Andrea, thank you. Thank you very much, Beauty Rest, for your super sticker. In case I didn't say thank you to the unanointed, thank you for your super sticker as well. Vicky and Benji Celtic Tech. My mother almost died in 1970, refusing blood when getting a goiter surgery. I'm very sorry to hear that, Vicky. JW Paradise Lost says, it's for marketing reasons. The more people that die by refusing blood, they can advertise that they had strong faith and become example for others. I think it is very much to do with just being different, you know, just, you know, for there to be some controversy and, oh, here's a controversial issue that we're making a stand on. I think that's kind of how it started. But as I've already explained, once you've killed the first few or the first person from this change in teaching, you have to stick with it or accept responsibility for having killed someone. And we're now thousands and thousands of people, thousands and thousands of deaths into this teaching. So the chances of them doing a U-turn reduce with every person that dies, unfortunately. Ali Dowd, who is Jewish, is correcting me. Thank you, Ali, on the Pikuuk Nefesh. Pikuuk Nefesh. Thank you very much. But good try, says Ali. Thank you. Mitchell McGraw says they're not okay with blood transfusions, but when they're fine with a heart transplant, as long as they wipe all the blood off of it first. Yeah, it's. I mean, they did at one point prohibit organ transplants, but that didn't last long before they got rid of that prohibition. But yeah, it's crazy that you can have a new heart that pumps the blood, but not the blood itself. Drench says, when you see the reality of the blood doctrine, you can't unsee it. And when you move the curse, and the disappointment that's behind it is a real estate company. Very true. Elvin Wright says, what if your teeth bleed, you eat blood? I mean, this may sound like just a throwaway remark, but the reality is that, as from a Jehovah's Witness standpoint, it's not just that you're not allowed to receive other people's blood, you're not allowed to receive your own blood. So your own blood cannot, according to them, leave your body and re-enter it. But as Elvin Wright says, when your teeth bleed, you know, it's it's literally already in your mouth, so you're going to swallow it. And, you know, we've all, even as Jehovah's Witnesses, if you cut yourself, let's say on your arm, what's the first thing you do? You know, it's almost like instinctive, like primal. Like you immediately go to suck up the blood so that it's not going to gather in a massive big glob and then drip everywhere. You don't want your blood to be dripping. So all Jehovah's Witnesses do that, by the way. Everyone who like pricks their thumb on like a thistle or something, they immediately do that. The blood has left the body and then re-entered, which is, according to Jehovah's Witness teachings, wrong. You know, again, we're awash with blood, one way or the other, whether it's cow's blood or our own blood, or our mother's blood. So the governor says, counter quote, Colossians 2 verse 16, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. Thank you for that verse. The governor, who is also a patron. So, and thank you for the super chat. Very generous. Beauty Rest says, Saul and his men were not put to death for eating meat with the blood. This is true. This is, I think I mentioned this in my video, 10 things that Jehovah's Witnesses need to know about blood transfusions. I'm pretty sure I mentioned the verse about Saul and how there's even like questions from readers on it that doesn't make any sense at all. But there was a situation where Saul and his soldiers ate blood or drank blood, whatever, and weren't put to death because it was a serious situation. I forget the exact wording that they use in the question from readers, but it was a sufficiently grave situation where it was okay and they didn't need to be punished by being executed. Well, surely the same logic should apply to when someone's life is on the line because they need a blood transfusion. Jehovah saw their dire situation. So if you need blood in order to live, that's a dire situation too. I couldn't agree more, Beauty Rest. Thank you for bringing that up for the benefit of any Jehovah's Witnesses who may be watching. Sabrina says, thank you for the factual info on what the elements of life-giving blood and how it can save lives. Too many friends have lost their lives to this horrible organisation. Martyrdom is not how I want to die. Fully agree with you there, Sabrina. Victoria Roberts says, I remember a 19-year-old Jehovah's Witness I looked after when I was training to be a nurse. He had been in a car crash and needed a transfusion. The HLC came, so I had to watch him slowly die. It was heartbreaking. I think they allude, or they may have already alluded in this footage, to the emotional burden that HLC elders have to deal with. You know, it's going to eat away at their souls to be watching so much death. And as well, if I were a medical professional who had witnessed a death due to this, I would be apoplectic to see the ignorance and the arrogance that's behind all this on full display in this video. So you have my deepest condolences, Victoria. That must have been a terrible situation to live through. Blessed Chains says, it's such a stressful false teaching, lacking joy, love, and followers are so strained and stressed to appease the Watchtower organisation. There are a lot of people getting cancer in the local congregation here. Sad. Thank you for that comment. Al8178 says, how do they justify saying life is precious while at the same time ready to throw it away with infantile medical knowledge? Well, it's not just infantile, it's not non-existent medical knowledge. They don't have the training, do they? They're not in any position at all to be inserting themselves in patient care. Linda Turner, thank you very much for your super chat. Angels of death, to be sure. Couldn't agree more. Sabrina also says, now that elders are younger and younger, they're the ones making those decisions on behalf of hundreds of ill or dying brothers and sisters. Elders on HLC could only be 19 or 20 years old. That's very true. No experience. So Sabrina makes the very good point that elders nowadays are, out of necessity, being appointed at younger and younger ages. So it's not just that they have no medical trainings to begin with, it's the fact that they also will increasingly be lacking in life experience. Al8178 says, how do they justify saying life is precious while at the same time being willing to throw it away? I'm sorry, I think I have already read that, but I think maybe has this been, yeah, this has been repeated as a super chat. So thank you very much indeed, Al8178. Vicky and Benji Celtic Tech says, love has nothing to do with this. Can't agree more. Rachel A, can't believe I used to believe this. I definitely feel that way as well, Rachel. Abigail Parker, the blood policy is a continuous martyrdom project, much as the Malawi persecution was for my generation. Absolutely nail on the head. Victoria Roberts says the GDPR office need to see a copy of this. It's the data commissioner in European countries and the UK. I would love for the data commissioner in multiple countries to be aware of the way HLC members are being encouraged to completely violate patient privacy. And Serenity S says they have no business giving medical advice. They have absolutely no idea what they are talking about. Couldn't agree more. I'm not sure reading those comments has helped me with my blood pressure, but it's certainly better than listening to what this goon is coming out with. And we need to return to it, I'm afraid. So, onward.
Appendix A is very useful. You might want to put a copy in your medical emergency response bag. Key medical specialities, HLC 9, who's who in the hospital.
Who's who in the hospital. So they have a document at their disposal. If you're watching this, by the way, and you're a medical professional, I hope you're okay with your name being on a document, you know, that lists the individuals in a given hospital so that they can know who's who. Which I didn't even know this was a thing until I watched this. So they're not just harvesting data on Jehovah's Witnesses against their knowledge, they're also putting the names of medical professionals into a document so that they can know who's who. I don't think I've exaggerated. Let's just go over that again because I think that's a key point. 539.
WACS or DOACs, and the reversal issues that are associated with these. Appendix A is very useful. You might want to put a copy in your medical emergency response bag. Key medical specialities, HLC 9, who's who in the hospital.
So HLC 9 is the name of the document.
And last but certainly not least, information for expectant mothers, the S401.
So S401 is a pack that goes out to all expectant mothers. So as I was mentioning earlier, you're not going to know about the HLC unless you or someone you care about is involved in a medical emergency, or you're an expectant mother. If you're an expectant mother, you will be handed information. It might not be by a HLC member, it might be just by your local elders, informing you about how to, basically giving you advice on what to do in case of a situation where you might need blood when you're giving birth, or as part of your treatment with your baby. So that's how you're going. If you're not an expectant mother or involved in some kind of medical emergency, you're not going to really encounter the HLC, which even they acknowledge. But yeah, I just thought it was worth flagging that.
And we've had some really useful announcements in connection with this recently. The June the 30th, 2021 announcement alerted us to the need to start using the S401 in the place of the pregnancy care plan. And the November 29, 2021 announcement very helpfully gave us a specific checklist for us as HLC members to have a discussion with mum and dad to ensure that the parents can effectively use the S401.
I need to hear that again. Sorry, I was looking at the comments.
21 announcements alerted us to the need to start
Something
using the
about mum and dad.
S401 in the place of the pregnancy care plan. And the November 29, 2021 announcement very helpfully gave us a specific checklist for us as HLC members to have a discussion with mum and dad to ensure that the parents can effectively use the S401.
A conversation with the parents, what? So they can make sure their kid dies if their child is involved in a medical emergency. I mean, I don't have the document to hand, unfortunately. Maybe the document is in circulation through leaks, but yeah, that's a bit unclear.
Okay, so that's the third point. Now, the fourth guiding principle is found in Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 22. So would you turn to that with me? Proverbs 15, verse 22. Note with me this basic fact. It applies to life in general, but especially to HLC work. Okay, Proverbs 15, verse 22. Plans fail when there is no consultation, but there is accomplishment through many advisors.
Accomplishment.
What's the basic counsel found
Martyrdom
here?
is an accomplishment.
Yes, two heads are better than one. So we are encouraged here to collaborate with others. So who can we work with? Where can we turn for help? Well, within our own committee, there are committee members who can be asked to provide additional support to help in difficult cases. One of the benefits of social media is that hospital liaison committees might find electronic group chats to be very useful for sharing non-confidential information.
It's interesting he says non-confidential information. So he's now alluding to the fact that HLC members have group chats we can assume on things like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. And he's saying, well, these might be useful for sharing non-confidential information. You're not telling me. I mean, I can't claim this, just for let me be clear, for legal reasons. I cannot claim this to be the case, but, you know, by its very nature, the HLC arrangement is invading confidential. It's inserting itself in confidential situations. So how can they not share confidential information if they're literally talking here about gathering confidential information without consent and keeping a list of doctors without their knowledge, keeping details of medical professionals without their knowledge? The whole setup is predicated on sharing confidential information.
And if we're having difficulty in identifying a cooperative clinician, we can contact neighbouring HLCs who may have a suitable doctor on their list. And if a case is particularly difficult, and it appears that the legal authorities or the media may become involved, then the hospital information department should be contacted immediately.
So this is interesting. What they're saying here, obviously, is that the HLC is involving itself in all life or death matters inside its jurisdiction. So let's say the northwest of England. I think this guy's from Liverpool, so I don't know. He probably only deals with Liverpool congregations, but let's say it goes all the way into Lancashire or wherever his personal jurisdiction is. When there's a life or death matter, his HLC kind of leap into action and again push the no blood narrative, and they only apparently involve the hospital information department back in London if it's likely to get serious, if the media gets involved, for example, or if it becomes a legal matter where there's a judge might rule, for example, that a doctor should transfuse a minor against the will of the parents. So we're learning a little bit more about the chain of command and at what point hospital information services gets involved in a medical emergency.
You may recall the announcement from August 11, 2020 about the need to let HID know if any paediatric cases are likely to go to court. Note that this requirement relates to cases even where the law might only get involved. The reason, well, rather than wait until the
he
cases
means that only might get involved rather than might only get involved.
Actually ended up in court, with sufficient advance notification, HID might be able to identify whether the patient's a suitable mature minor who could demonstrate sufficient capacity and maturity to be able to make an informed decision and effectively use the legal resources available to the organisation.
Let's just repeat
informed
that.
Decision and effectively who could demonstrate sufficient capacity. Wait until the case has actually ended up in court. With sufficient advance notification, HID might be able to identify whether the patient's a suitable mature minor who could demonstrate sufficient capacity and maturity to be able to make an informed decision and effectively use the legal resources available to the organisation to maybe establish a legal precedent in this very, very important area.
So they want cases, they want to gather cases where a Jehovah's Witness who is a child, who isn't in a position to know what their religious beliefs are, but whose parents are keen for them to die over the religious beliefs of the parent. They want situations that are going through the courts to be kind of fast-tracked to HID, the Hospital Information Department, and to legal services. Not just so legal services can interject in that particular case and try to pressure the judge or the doctors into making sure no blood gets transfused, even if it results in the child dying. They also want to establish a precedent in law so that they can basically use a particular case, and in future, when other Jehovah's Witness children are in the same situation, they can point back to the success they had with a particular case and say, well, this case went well for us, this set a precedent, judge, you should be doing for us what this particular judge did for us in this case. That's what he's saying here. So that's how that's how obsessed they are with making sure their agenda is pursued and that people die. They want to even establish legal precedents that will allow them to kill more kids.
But of course, we're realists and we know that difficulties arise from time to time with the medical community. What do? We avoid confrontation and we continue to foster good communication between the patient and the medical staff.
They don't need to foster good communication between the patient and the medical staff. Why? Why do they need to? The patient is capable of representing themselves. You know, they don't do this if someone breaks their arm, or I don't know, needs some other routine medical procedure. It's only in cases involving blood where they feel they need to foster good communications between the patient and the medical staff, which tells you everything. It's nothing whatsoever to do with fostering communication. Apologies, by the way, Serenity, your comment's been on the screen all this time. I will take more comments shortly. It's nothing to do whatsoever with being a middleman in terms of communication. It's all about, again, making sure a certain outcome happens, namely the refusal of blood, even if it kills the patient.
And that's one reason why we're continually looking to expand our cooperating and consulting doctors lists. These can be an invaluable resource when our brothers appear to have reached a brick wall with regard to treatment options. We continually marvel at how one closed door suddenly becomes an opportunity because another hospital liaison committee has a respected consulting doctor who is prepared to help.
So a lot of the work of HLCs is to expand their list of quote-unquote cooperative doctors. And I think we're going to see more of that in the conference about this particular avenue of HLC work. They are very much about making lists. That they want lists of all the doctors in a given hospital, but they also want lists of doctors who are willing to perform certain procedures, or are, how can I put it, more sympathetic to the Jehovah's Witness position, so that even if in a certain area, in this case Liverpool, even if they don't have a doctor in, say, Liverpool who's willing to bend over backwards for the HLC, if they can find one in, say, Leicester, and and this doctor or consultant is willing to take on the case or whatever, that they want to facilitate that. So they're interested in expanding their network of doctors who buy into their no blood thing, even though it's nothing to do with the patient care and improving patient care. It's all about just making sure blood is refused even if the patient dies.
Where else can we turn for help, for assistance? Well, while we focus on the clinical aspects of our brothers' care, we can involve the patient visitation group if needed to assist with shepherding visits, accommodation and other practical needs. So
just in case any medical professionals are watching, the patient visitation group is the, you could say, the non-invasive, or it's supposed to be the non-invasive aspect of Jehovah's Witness intervention, where it's purely about pastoral care. It's purely about praying by the bedside and comforting and providing support. That's what the patient visitation group is there to do. Whereas the hospital liaison committee, it's not for simply praying or providing pastoral support. It's again for enforcing the blood teaching.
And of course, the local body of elders should remain actively involved. They know their brother or sister better than us. They're the local shepherds. They've got the responsibility to care for the sheep in their care in accordance with Isaiah 32, verse 1. And that's why the Shepherding Book, chapter 11, paragraph 6, makes it clear. The HLC and PVG arrangements do not relieve the elders or others in the congregation of their responsibility to support publishers who are hospitalised. That's there for the elders themselves to read. If the patient's a minor, it's important that the parents have had the opportunity to discuss the S55, or how parents can protect their children from misuse of blood.
It's important that the parents have the time to... Sometimes there is no time. This is the point. It's a medical emergency. Sometimes there's going to be loads of time to the point where they can have like a court case or whatever. But sometimes it's like seconds are ticking by, and all of this relies upon time, on having time to sit down with the parents and drill the parents on what they need to do in order to make sure their child dies if necessary.
It's not a direct responsibility of the HLC member to do this. Rather, we encourage the body of elders to review with the parents the document in accordance with Shepherding, Chapter 11, Paragraph 2. If the case involves a pregnant sister, confirm with the elders that they've provided her and her husband, if he's a Jehovah's Witness, with a copy of the S401, which will then prompt the discussion outlined in the 29th of November 21 announcement that we discussed earlier. So what a privilege we have to courageously support our integrity-keeping brothers and sisters when they face medical situations.
It's not about supporting them.
Nevertheless, we must never lose sight of the basic truth that the patient must carry his own load when making medical decisions.
It's definitely not about allowing the patient to carry their own load. If it were that simple, why are you even there? If a Jehovah's Witness breaks their arm playing football, or let's say I once dislocated my knee playing football. The HLC weren't involved then. There wasn't even a whiff of the HLC in the hospital treatment room when they were popping my knee back into its socket and putting it in plaster and all that kind of thing. Couldn't be bothered. It wasn't interesting because it didn't involve the blood teaching. It's only in this specific area of the refusal of blood do they care. And how can they even remotely pretend that this is about assisting in the personal choice of Jehovah's Witnesses when they're lurking in the shadows, inserting themselves arbitrarily in this particular sphere of medical treatment?
Can't succumb to the "what would you do" question.
Let's just go back a bit.
So we must never lose sight of the basic truth that the patient must carry his own load when making medical decisions. We can't succumb to the "what would you do" question. And neither would we puzzle at why someone would accept a heart-lung bypass machine but refuse intraoperative cell salvage. We must always leave decision-making to the patient.
No decision-making.
Our role is to help the brother in his determination to remain loyal to Jehovah and to conscientiously obey his command to abstain from blood.
We need to help Jehovah's Witnesses to conscientiously obey the command to this is something where Jehovah's Witnesses need help in doing something that's very personal. We're here to help them do something that's personal to them. But how he can say all this with a straight face is beyond me.
And we have to realistically accept that there are going to be times when difficult medical situations develop to such an extent that a negative outcome may not always be avoidable.
Let's hear that again.
Our role is to help the brother in his determination to remain loyal to Jehovah and to conscientiously obey his command to abstain from blood. And we have to realistically accept that there are going to be times when difficult medical situations develop to such an extent that a negative outcome may not always be avoidable.
A negative outcome, the patient dying, may not always be avoidable because they've refused blood. That's what he's talking about here. This brother Gregory. Look at him there. I bet he's overseen a fair few of those. I bet he's masterminded a fair few negative outcomes, as he puts it, very casually. Oh, this was a negative outcome. This kid dying, or this brother or sister dying refusing blood. We'll just chalk that down to a negative outcome. It was a difficult medical situation that we interfered in, and it had a negative outcome. It's disturbing, isn't it? It's really disturbing.
None of us are immune to the basic truth of Ecclesiastes 9:11. Time and unexpected results overtake us.
Yeah, we'll just chalk that down to Ecclesiastes 9 verse 11. Time and unexpected events overtake all of us, especially those of us who have decided to be angels of death, grim reapers who stand by the bedsides of ailing Jehovah's Witnesses.
So let's just take a moment to review the 5 points that we've just discussed. Be a loving shepherd, gather accurate information,
With or without their consent.
analyse the case, make wise use of available resources, and collaborate with others. In our Bible reading, we've recently studied the life of King David. We can take comfort in reflecting on his record. He had great zeal for Jehovah's name. He courageously took on Goliath, a massive opponent, but he helped the Israelites gain.
This is the intellectual level of a HLC member, not just any HLC member, but a HLC member who's sufficiently senior to be lecturing other HLC members in an annual video conference. This dude believes in a how many foot high was Goliath? 9 foot high? I don't know exactly. This guy believes in a kind of mythical giant with 5 fingers, or was it 5 fingers and 5 toes, who defeated King David. He's a Bible literalist, and he's bringing that intellectual clout, the intellectual clout of someone who believes in Goliath. He's bringing that to the table in a medical emergency. Hey, I can help here as someone who believes in Goliath and the Garden of Eden and a literal earth-consuming flood of Noah. I might have something to contribute because I've just been on Google for 5 minutes. So listen to what I have to say. What an idiot.
The victory. Now, we may face Goliath-like situations. In dealing with doctors, judges, social workers, we may feel like we're facing a formidable giant-like adversary. But with Jehovah on our side, and by applying these guiding principles, we can courageously and effectively assist our brothers when handling medical cases. Brother Wayne Sorsby will now present the part, Handling Medical Cases, a step-by-step approach.
We made it. We're there. So that was the first 2 talks, or the opening 2 talks of the 2022 annual video conference for hospital liaison committees. I think it's fair to say that this is a UK exclusive thing. I would imagine that if you're an elder or a HLC member in America, you're going to get a different series of speakers, I would imagine. So quite how they organise the video conferences themselves, I'm a little bit in the dark on. Although this is legit, this is a legit kind of video. It's not been staged or anything. This has been leaked by a HLC insider who will remain anonymous and who is incredibly brave for sharing this information so that we can share it with others. I think if we can possibly get this information in front of medical professionals and legislators and government agencies, we absolutely should do that. Let's go to a few comments. I'm desperately trying to make sure that I incorporate as many of your comments as possible. So here's a few that I've selected, and I apologize if there are any that I've missed that, I apologize for any that I haven't had time to include. So Sabrina says, HIPAA goes right out of the window when it comes to the HLC. HLC, once again, have no medical training. They have no schooling in medical conditions. Once again, they could be only 19 or 20 years old. Very true. Victoria Roberts says, because Dr. Google has never misdiagnosed anyone. Indeed. It's chilling, isn't it, that just a drive-by bit of research can make an elder feel like he can go toe-to-toe with a medical professional in a life or death situation. Sabrina says, if a person is newly out of the organisation, make sure you change medical records with all doctors and medical professionals to allowing blood products. Check with all providers to change medical directives. Yeah, that's actually something that you tend to miss. A basic bit of housekeeping. When you get out of Jehovah's Witnesses, you might still have a blood card. You might still have all the paperwork filed with your doctor telling them to automatically refuse blood if you're in a medical emergency. So see your GP, see your doctor, make sure that your blood card gets destroyed. Make sure that they can't martyr you even though you no longer believe any of that stuff. Agev Nis, I apologize if I've mispronounced. We're not doctors. We're just a bunch of fools trying to lecture real doctors. That's the sum total of it, definitely. Emily Solomon Davis says, the brothers are good at steamrolling over things anyway, so might as well get in there and be Snoopy. Absolutely. Crisis of Logic says arrogance and ignorance. That could be the title of this show, couldn't it? Instead of the blood tapes, just call it arrogance and ignorance. Tony Cutty says most medical professionals would have to pretend to listen while either laughing or throwing up on the inside. Yeah, goodness only knows what it must be like to be dealing with these individuals like Brother Gregory, who believes in Goliath and considers himself an expert on a particular condition because he's got a document in his briefcase that was handed to him or he's been on a website. Love Wins says the losers on the Hospital Liaison Committee get off on the power of life and death. Sick. It seems that they do enjoy that sort of power. I think you'd have to be a very twisted individual, I think, to insert yourself on this level in someone's personal medical treatment and stick at it for maybe years or decades. Post-cult Haig, I've probably mispronounced, says, I knew an elderly man in his late 70s who was disfellowshipped for taking blood. I felt so sorry for him. I had to shun him. Breaks my heart because he lost everything in order to save his life. Again, if you are a medical professional watching this, what the commenter has said here is true. It's actually not disfellowshipping, it's disassociation. So, which is the same outcome. By allowing HLC elders into the hospital ward, you're allowing religious leaders who have the power to separate families if things don't go the way they want. So an individual who, quote, willfully and unrepentantly accepts a blood transfusion is automatically disassociated and shunned, according to the Shepherd Book. Clyde Bell says, my aunt refused a transplant and had to be on dialysis for decades. By the time she got a transplant, it was too late. The damage had been done. I wonder what her life would have been like. So Clyde there talking about the brief window when the blood prohibition was expanded to include organ transplants, which thankfully they went back on that But I doubt, for reasons stated, that they'll ever go back on the blood transfusion teaching, although I would love to be surprised. Vicky and Benji Celtic Tech says this organisation gets off on martyrdom in their name. Similar sentiments to what was said earlier. Crisis of Logic. I recall also a lot of quackery being heavily promoted within the congregation, for example, homeopathy, almost like there's an intrinsic distrust of actual medical knowledge being allowed to be built in. I agree with you there, Crisis of Logic. I think when you look at the organisation's history, particularly some of the Golden Age articles where they were ranting about aluminium, and all sorts of mad medical nonsense, which I intend to make a video. I don't just intend, I will make a video on at one point, because actually my patrons have asked me to. There's a long history of Jehovah's Witnesses as a religion, even going back to the time when they were called Bible students, just being averse to medicine, period, and being more into, as you say, homeopathy and kind of mad kind of cures and mad kind of gadgets and what have you. At one point, there's one quote where they said that people should take sun baths. If you bathe in the sun, that's going to help cure you of stuff. They had all sorts of strange ideas. And I think that the blood teaching is almost like a natural progression from, as you say, this inbuilt distrust of medicine that's been part and parcel of the Jehovah's Witness culture, going all the way back to when they called themselves Bible students. Blessed Chains says, a local Jehovah's Witness mother just died like a month ago giving birth and refused to receive blood. Shake my damn head. Absurd. Well, there you go. I mean, it's taking lives as we speak. It's not just hypothetical. This is why I'm doing this series. If only it were hypothetical. If only it was like, this is what we'd like to be able to do. This is being done, and this is being done on like a day-by-day basis. And Jehovah's Witnesses are dying, almost as we speak, probably as we speak, due to this sort of arrogance and this sort of fanaticism. That's what it is, fanaticism. Vicky and Benji Celtic Tech say, I would have never let my only child die if she had needed blood. Yeah, well, thankfully you were never in that situation. But yeah, I like to think I would have been the same. It just goes so utterly against nature that you wonder how any Jehovah's Witness parents could do that. But if you check out my video, The Martyrdom of Jerod Scepter, Jerod spelt Jerod, you'll see Jehovah's Witness video propaganda featuring a couple who did exactly that. And Al8178 says, you are correct, Lloyd. Not infantile, just completely non-factual knowledge. So I've just skimmed through a few of the comments there. Apologies for all the many, many comments that I've missed. There's currently 215 watching this live stream, and I can imagine many more will watch after it's finished, which it will do very shortly. All I can say to the 215 now watching, and to anyone who watches after the fact, is thank you for caring about this issue. Thank you for caring about this horrendous HLC arrangement, this machine for martyrdom that Jehovah's Witnesses revel in, this idea of men in suits turning up to assist Jehovah's Witnesses in what should be a personal decision. And that, a machinery, an operation that very often results in Jehovah's Witnesses dying, or as Brother Gregory so casually put it, in a negative outcome. That's how they shrug it off. Oh, that was a negative outcome. So that was volume 2 of the blood tapes. Look out for volume 3 in the weeks ahead, or as quickly as I can get it to you. We will have more from the 2022 Hospital Liaison Committee video conference. I just must thank, while I have the opportunity, once again, my HLC contact, for forwarding me this information. And if you are able to pass this information on, you the viewer, to the medical community, to your political representatives, or to local government agencies that might have an interest in the violation of data privacy or HIPAA violations or whatever, please do pass this information on, because who knows, maybe it will save lives. So that's all I have for you. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for similar videos and for future live streams. But for now, that's all I have. Thank you for watching.